Hello, in just a moment we've got the press preview for you. I'll look at what's in the morning papers. First though, a reminder of our top stories here this evening. And Donald Trump has reignited his personal attack on the federal judge who halted his travel ban, telling the country to blame him if America is attacked. The Israeli Prime Minister is to press Theresa May to take a tougher stance on Iran. The pair meet tomorrow in London. And far-right candidate Marine Le Pen has launched her campaign to become the next French president by promising a Frexit referendum within 6 months if elected. Hello, you're watching the press preview on Sky News. Joining me this evening to go through the papers is the author and businessman Michael Heyman and the Daily Mirror columnist known as Fleet Street Fox, Susie Boniface. So welcome to both of you.
Hi.
So let's take a look at what's on those front pages then. And the Metro leads with Theresa May's rent revolution and the government's plans to shake up the housing market. The Financial Times leads on claims from big business leaders that Brexit is already having a negative effect on Britain. The Daily Telegraph says that 1 in 6 accident and emergency wards are under threat of closure, calling it the worst ever crisis facing the NHS. The Times also leads with the story about the NHS, saying hospitals will be legally obliged to charge foreign patients for treatment. And that's also the story the Daily Express goes with, saying that NHS tourists will be made to pay. The Daily Mirror has allegations about a plot to blackmail David Beckham, and The Sun also leads with a story about David Beckham too. So let's chat through those front pages and some of the stories inside as well with Michael Heyman and Susie Boniface. And you've picked out the Times to kick off with their NHS story suggesting that hospitals will be legally obliged to charge migrants and other foreign patients, it's saying, to try and curb what they describe as health tourism.
Yeah, except it's not a massive problem. And in fact, a lot of this stuff that's coming out as an announcement here, in order to set the agenda for this week, comes, of course, after last week there was a lot of stories about a Nigerian lady who had quadruplets here, who was wrongly labelled a health tourist when she came here without any intention to come here at all. And remember, she had 2 children that died. So she isn't exactly here on a holiday, the poor woman. But what's happened is Jeremy Hunt has said that there's going to be a new law coming in April saying that GPs and receptionists will have to flag up any overseas visitors. Now, I don't know what your GPs are like, but mine certainly doesn't to give appointments to random people who've just flown in from Heathrow. You have to be resident to have a GP's part of the practice and to register and get an appointment. So I don't know how that's going to work. And hospitals already have to have an obligation to charge foreign visitors who don't have a right to care.
And I think that's the key point, which is that they're collecting about 65% already. I think that he's announcing something here which is already being handled and carried out to some part by the NHS. But I think, in some respects, I think this whole story is all part of the ability of the NHS to cope with the demands that we've got on it. And I think that this is part of, you know, the message and the agenda that the government is trying to get out to the public at large, which is about the responsibility for using the NHS in the future.
They're not using the right thing, because they're saying that, you know, health tourism costs up to £2 billion, it's outrageous and we're wasting so much money. No. About £1.8 billion is from people who are here as tourists but happen, unfortunately, to fall ill. And most of them tend to pay for that care in retrospect. The issue of actual health tourism, of someone travelling to another country intentionally to take advantage of their system, is £100 to £280 million. Now, that's a lot of money for any of us, or people at home, but overall that's 0.24% of the NHS budget. We waste more on missed GP appointments. So if Jeremy Hunt was doing exactly that, wanting us all to think more about how we're wasting money in our NHS, he should be telling us all to keep GP. It's more of a thing.
I'm not on disagreement. You know, they've outlined, I think it's 500 million that they can claw back from this,
which is that's
the promise. But I think that, you know, the thing that's really at play here, I think, is one of the other papers that's saying 22 A&E sort of wards that may be closed. I mean, I think the NHS is in a great deal of trouble at the moment in terms of its future. I think that there is a debate that has to happen with the country at large about what we're prepared to do to invest in it properly. I think in many respects this sort of story is is not really a big story in the sense that so much of it's already happening, so much is already
and yet
there.
They're addressing something that people do feel angry about,
Yeah,
aren't
but
they?
that's the thing.
Yeah.
They're making people feel angry about it because they're telling us all that this costs billions, and that is frankly a lie. Anyone at home can go and check the figures themselves. Intentional NHS tourism is no more than £280 million a year. But the Department of Health itself has estimated that in order to claw back somewhere between 15 and 25 million pounds it's owed would cost 18 million pounds. So the money that we don't get, that's probably because someone along the line has decided that getting it is costing more than you would actually get from it. So you're going to have a loss at some point.
So I think there was probably a legitimate public sort of issue in the sense of actually money should be reclaimed, but I happen to think that it's the sideshow. It's not the real show about
while we're
actually
worrying
what
about
needs to be
this,
done.
we're not worrying about the real problems in the NHS.
OK, let's move back to the Times. That story also on the front of the Daily Express, as you noted. Let's go back to the Times, because you actually wanted to comment on the column down the side there. This is some of Donald Trump's latest comments. He's done an interview, which has aired just in the last hour or so, actually, ahead of the Super Bowl, hasn't he, with Fox News, in which he has compared Russia to America in a particular way that has prompted quite a reaction.
Well, he has, and you know, I think the sort of the love affair in some ways with Russia continues. I mean, I think that you know, well, actually, you know, it's either Jekyll and Hyde, because on the one hand he's prepared to say some great things about Russia, but on the other hand, as you can see here, conceding yesterday that Putin is a killer. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but he didn't say that in an attacky kind of way.
No,
he was quite glad that Putin's
no, that's
a killer.
right. I mean, if
he said he is a killer, but the US hasn't got a great record or something itself.
If you're going to judge people by the company that they keep, I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, the bedrock of American foreign policy has been, for the last 50 years, has always had a wary distance to the Soviet Union and then to Russia. And I think that, you know, this is week 3 for Donald Trump. I mean, he's ripped up the rule book completely. I think that the relationship with Russia could completely destabilise so many of our natural NATO allies and East European allies. And I think that, in many respects, some responsibility's got to kick in somewhere.
How do you think this might play with some Republicans, given that he's said the US has made mistakes as well when asked about Putin being a killer? He mentioned Iraq. I mean, are there going to be some veterans who feel pretty upset to have that comparison?
And, you know, Trump has had lots of run-ins with the Republican Party when he was in the running for nomination and then as president. And so he doesn't really care too much if he upsets some of the old Republican guard. But when you start saying that we're a lot like Putin, your Republican senators, as they have here, Marco Rubio and Mitch McConnell, start saying, when have we ever had a Democrat activist poisoned? You know, when have we ever done a Litvinenko? No, we are not like Putin. And if you start to annoy them, the problem is that in the good thing is that in the US Constitution, it's Congress which kind of have power over the president. So as he goes along with his executive orders and starts to run out of actual new ideas or something, it's laws you have to pass through. You have to get stuff through Congress. Congress can block everything the president does. And if you start upsetting your own party, he's going to have real problems.
Interesting you mentioned those checks and balances, because, of course, on the front of The Guardian, there's a story about just that. Again, his travel ban has run into trouble again. He's not been allowed to appeal against it. He's got to come up with more arguments for that to progress. He's frustrated. He's back on Twitter tonight again, getting pretty angry with the federal judge who has banned it. This rolls on.
Well, I think, you know, in some respects, there is a similarity between these two stories, which is, I guess, the celebration of the end justifies the means, the ultimate in realpolitik. I mean, here you've got this sort of attack on the so-called judge and this tweet.
He called him so-called
judge. The so-called judge. This is what he called him on Twitter, and that if there is an attack on US sovereign soil, that this will be down to the judge. I mean, it's sort of, you know, this is the most powerful office in the land, and I think that there is the absolute requirement to have the responsibility to act appropriately and proportionately. And I think that on this is that he's going to have a lot more checks and balances over the next 4 years. And that's a good thing. That's what's made US presidents successful in the past, which is the checks and balances that are afforded to them by the Constitution. Get them to stop and think about what they're saying. We need more evidence of that now.
But what's going to happen is that Trump, you know, he's promised a wall, he's promised immigration blocks, so on and so forth. He's going to try to do that by executive order. When a court throws it out as unconstitutional, when Congress says, no, you can't, and the Constitution says we have right of veto over you, Mr. President, he's going to get more and more frustrated. And there's going to come a point where going on Twitter to be angry the moment he wakes up in the morning is not going to be enough. And I really don't think it's going to be very long, as we were saying earlier on, that someone somewhere is either a Trump supporter is either going to start, attacking the judge because Donald has tweeted about them, which is going to cause big problems, or someone's going to suggest a Trump amendment to the Constitution, and then we really are in dangerous waters.
Remember,
at the same time, he was was democratically elected with a promise to do just this.
Yes, he was, and I think this is the thing, right? Is that there's nothing here that in any way should surprise us. I mean, he's doing what he said he would do: drain the swamp. These are the very characters that he has identified as being, if you like, the enemy within, and I think that in many respects he's being consistent to that. But I think he'll run out of road very quickly.
The person who's surprised here is Trump. He's surprised that when he signs an order, it doesn't automatically happen. This is not someone who had read the US Constitution and the rule book of how to be a president before he went and did it, or before he started making his promises. So he's now in a difficult situation. He's promised lots of things. He can't deliver it. What happens when he can't deliver it? Who does he blame? Where does he go next? That's the important issue.
OK, one to watch. Let's move on to the front of the Financial Times now, because you've focused in on the picture. That is Marine Le Pen, although, interestingly, Le Pen has been dropped from her publicity material, hasn't it? Her slogan is now Marine.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's launched her campaign today, hasn't she?
Having kicked her father out of the party for being anti-Semitic, she's now dropped his name as well, which is probably quite wise on her part. They should have done a bit sooner.
For the campaign, not
For the campaign, exactly. And there's talk now that she's very much in the running and she could well get through the first round. Now, I was listening on my way in this evening to someone on the radio saying there was no way she could possibly be president of France, because if they get through to the second round, France is one of those wonderful countries where you can vote against somebody. So if she were in the second round, there'd be a grand coalition of voters for the other candidate, whether they were right, left or centrist, just to be anti-Marine. But that only works. We've been here before saying that couldn't possibly happen. But that only works if there is a decent turnout. If there is a low turnout because the middle classes are just put off voting for either of the two dreadful choices, then we have a Trump and Hillary situation. Yeah, we have the people that are voting are the ones who have the most to gain from voting for her.
She has a very valuable thing, at the moment, which is momentum. And I think momentum in politics really does matter. I mean,
there is another candidate that's got momentum as well, isn't there? Emmanuel Macron.
Macron has got well, but I mean, I think
again seen as an outsider. He might. Well,
they are. This might well be what it is. Is it's the two outsiders. I mean, I think the thing that I was laughing about with her speech was this idea about France first, America first. I mean, how many nations can go first before somebody has to ultimately come second? But this is straightforward, a nationalist pitch to the French voter to give some fairly straightforward and simplistic answers to some quite complicated problems about France's place in the world and Europe and so on. And I think that in the end, we have yet to see whether Macron can be that French Democrat that can turn the tide against her. But she's a very powerful candidate, and I think you could see just how much excitement and buzz there was in that rally. And I think to dismiss her as a joke is to make just the same mistakes that were made over Trump and were made in this country over Brexit debates.
OK. And she's promising a Frexit referendum, isn't she, within the first 6 months? We're going to take a pause.
Wine.
Sounds like some kind of French to-doing in the bedroom area.
I think we'll take a break. Shall we? Yes. I think we'll definitely take a break. I was going to try and move seamlessly from Frexit to Brexit, but it didn't really work. We're going to talk about how worried business leaders might be about Brexit after the break. You join us as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers with the author and businessman Michael Heyman and the Daily Mirror columnist known as Fleet Street Fox, Susie Boniface. And I just want to show you the front of the Daily Mail, because we've only just got that one in. They're focusing on the new housing white paper. We've heard a lot about the government shifting towards generation rent away from generation buy. And this is another side of it. They're talking about pensioners with large family homes being given incentives to downsize in order to try and free up those homes to get them back onto the property market. Anyway, just thought I'd show you that front page. Let's move on, though. The next choice that you had is the front of the Financial Times. Their lead story suggesting that some big business leaders are saying that Brexit's already having a negative effect. Well,
it's a slightly misleading survey, in my view. I mean, what it also says is that 96% of them feel that they're going to make a success of it as well. It's all part of this sort of pre-Article 50 triggering, part of this kind of build-up about how do we feel. You can go to another paper, go to the Telegraph tomorrow morning, and it will tell you that Bank of America is advising its clients to get ready for a sharp upswing in the value of the pound. And I think that it depends which paper you're reading in terms of which history you're believing at the moment. Because on the one hand, sure, there's a lot of big businesses that are having to make a lot of new plans at the moment, but my sense is that increasingly business is getting a sense that this is the reality the vote has taken. Many of them might not have wanted it, but actually the most important thing for them is about how do they get the show back on the road? How do they make a success of whatever the new sort of post-Brexit rules are? And actually certainty and an understanding of what comes next will be a big part of the answer.
Do you think there's been enough information for businessmen so far?
I think the immigration factor has been a big one. I think the more that it becomes clear that people have got, you know, the rights to access talent, that actually we can trade around the world and work with people from around the world in a way that doesn't feel restrictive or in any way damaging to the UK, I think will be a very welcome answer. I think they were getting close to it last week in Malta. There were a few conversations where Spain made some commitments. I think that more is happening for sure at the moment in terms of an understanding where it goes.
Sorry, but we're not going to have anything happening until, effectively, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty until things are over.
Yes.
We've Brexited and we're off out on the wide blue ocean by ourselves. And until that point, there's only going to be uncertainty. This is if anyone at home has ever been divorced, this is a period between issuing the writ and the decree absolute. And it can last for a very long time. It can be very quick, but it's probably going to be a long time. It's probably going to be really detailed. It's probably going to be very painful. It's probably going to have a lot of arguing and a lot of paying money you didn't want to pay, especially to the lawyers. But you're not going to have any clear idea until afterwards. And the problem is that business needs, as you said, certainty. And if it doesn't have that certainty and it's not going to know anything, and Theresa May is not going to tell anybody anything, then the situation of being concerned is going to worsen and increase over time.
But remember this also, I mean, business is not used to behaving in the political world like this. I mean, it's used to actually getting on with the rules. It's used to getting, in many respects, what business likes is it likes to understand where it stands, what it's got to do, what its requirements are. Right now, it's involved with a debate about where does British ambition go? Can we actually build this kind of free trading market economy, or are these problems going to hold it back?
OK, and we're going to move on. And you've picked out the story I referred to before, this shift in government thinking, shift in tone, is it? Towards
It's hysterical.
I didn't think it was funny.
The rent revolution, which Ed Miliband announced as Labour policy in early 2015. The 3-year rent tenancy,
a sincere form of flattery.
The ending of letting agents' fees was entirely an Ed Miliband policy, which, if you remember, the electorate was one of the things the electorate rejected at the ballot box. So Theresa has literally, talk about red Tories, they have genuinely just gone and stolen something hook, line and sinker, the whole lot, not even just a little bit of it, everything from Ed Miliband's generation rent policy. So the whole rent revolution.
Do you think he should have been more recognised for this? Or
well, they could have said, actually, Labour had a good idea, we're going to do this.
Is it a good idea?
It is a good idea to have longer tenancies, of course it is. Trouble is, if you try to ban letting agent fees, then you find that they get it somewhere else, so actually tenants don't lose out on things.
More property built that's designed for affordable rental.
Yeah, but we don't need any more properties. There are more than enough properties in this country for all the people that need a home. The problem is that you have something like 1.5 million people with second homes in the UK. There are something like 610,000 empty houses in the UK, according to the government. A third of them have been empty for more than 6 months. Now, if we just found a way to ensure that those empty homes were lived in before anybody was able to go and invest in something fresh, we wouldn't need to build more houses.
But there's also the issue of cities and London where the provision is bang under par.
You can tell I'm rushing you on.
Yes.
And it's for the very important reason. We have very little time and we've seen a lot of running royals on our front pages. There's one of them. There are 3 of them on one of the other front pages, and you did want to mention that briefly.
If we didn't see Kate one day? I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
I don't know.
Yes, 3 millionaires had a running race to promote...
But it was a good cause.
To promote a very good cause, their mental health charity. Exactly. People are running the marathon for that, so that's a good thing. Interestingly, the married couple lagged behind the young single-ish, not single, unmarried man who's obviously keeping fit for his girlfriend and won easily.
Well, I'd like to say they did a good job. I think it was a good thing they did. I think they raised a lot of attention on a worthy cause.
Yeah, but they knew they were going running, and only she is wearing any running gear. What the other 2 think they're doing?
Well, I think they got a bit of sort of brotherly competition going on there, and they took off and had a go.
There we go. And you did find an intriguing story about carrots, but we've got no time for it. So stay tuned for 11:30.
Come back in an hour.
Has nothing to do with Brexit.
Michael and Susie, thank you both very much indeed.